Hey, Brian from Snake Bytes here. Reptiles have been studied for hundreds of years, but it wasn't until the early 20th century that they were actually being kept as pets and as a hobby. We're going to take a look back at one of those pioneers, and I think you're going to be surprised at what we find. You're watching Snake Bytes. I've always been a history buff, and in particular a reptile history buff. What was really cool is one of our viewers sent me an email about his great-great-aunt, Rene Stiles, up in Minnesota that kept reptiles in the 1930s. Rene Stiles, in the 30s and early 40s, traveled the country with one of the first privately kept reptile collections. That's right, it wasn't a man that pioneered this amazing field.
No kidding.
Look at the way she's holding these Gila monsters. It makes me wonder if she even realizes that they were venomous. In this article here, it speaks of her milking her rattlesnakes before allowing her to get bit by them in beliefs that it would actually drain all the venom out. I would say that's sketchy at best. And how about this picture where she has a venomous snake draped around her neck like it's a common corn snake? This seems pretty insane. One of the myths I've heard throughout the years is how reptiles used to come into the country on shipments of bananas. Well, in this early article from the 30s, I guess you actually have proof where that legend came from. One of the most interesting things that I found was all the imported animals that she kept, like these boas or reticulated pythons, which interestingly enough were referred to as regal pythons in this article. But the most surprising animal of all to me was this Australian diamond pythons. I have to wonder where she got all those exotic animals. Not to mention, Australia has never exported, so where did that Australian diamond python come from? And I tell you what, can you imagine not being able to take your animals to a reputable, knowledgeable, insightful reptile vet? As seen here, when she couldn't get an animal to feed, she had no choice but to force feed it, even if it was a dangerous, venomous snake. Without anyone to help guide her in her ventures with keeping reptiles, it's amazing that she was still able to produce some of the very first captive-produced reptiles. Whether it was gators, lizards, or a whole host of snakes that she kept, people traveled for miles around to see these amazing creatures that she had such a passion for. I have to wonder if it wasn't for these early pioneers like Rene Stiles, would there even be a hobby like there is today? I want to give you guys an appreciation for how far we've come in the last 80 years in the reptile community. Even though she could have had an animal like this corn snake, which is really prevalent all over the southeast part of this country, albino corn snakes didn't come available for another 30 to 40 years. And could you imagine what you would think of all the captive propagation that's going on? Like an animal like this, which is a 5-bang animal, a super pastel butter Enchi spider, this animal takes up to 7 or 8 years to produce. It's awesome to look back in amazement and realize how far the hobby has come. Thank you, Mrs. Stiles, for your contribution. I can only hope that 50 or 60 years from now, people will look back at the contributions being made in the reptile hobby today. For this week's Comment of the Week on the Snakes Balls on the Ground episode, the question was, what do you enjoy about the Super Bowl? And Will Socken said,
"It seems that I am in the minority when I say that I don't give a shit about the commercials because at the end of the day, they are still commercials. It's like the saying about polishing a turd, still a turd. College football for me any day of the week."
Yeah, I agree with you. And this year's commercials really sucked anyways. I was really disappointed. Until next time, you guys keep sending me creative comments. I'm going to feature you on a future episode.
All right, Cal's question of the week. Now, this episode we were talking about history, and I always think back of what time period I would want to live in. I would definitely want to live somewhere in the medieval times where I could be a knight. That way I could kill people that really annoyed me and get women really easily. I want to know from you guys, what time period would you live in? Text or video comment below. Let me know.
So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I can only hope that 100 years from now, people will look back at how far the hobby has come and maybe even enjoy some of the work that we put in getting it there. Next week, we're going to take a look at some of the more difficult snakes that we work with. Until next time, you've been watching Snake Bites.
Skarsgård, I have come to the conclusion that the person who stole the yellow snake would be Hendel.
Don't look at me.